Hello, this is Socially Triggered, and this video is going to be on the concept of infinite consumption. Now, you're probably thinking, we have a finite world and we're limited in resources. And one of the big problems that people suggest with capitalism is the fact that it does create a lot of consumption. From a very young age, we're actually taught how to be good consumers. We're taught, through TV ads and through whatever, all the ads, the propaganda that we get. It teaches us how to consume. We become creatures of consumption, and we we see that as being a real problem. And where we live in an infinite, not an infinite world, we live in a finite world with finite resources. And what happens is, if you have lots of consumption, especially like right now, it's really just Europe and North America that are the big consumers of the world. But now other countries are coming along and consuming a lot too. So, one of the big fears, and one of the fears that people have about the development of countries like China and India and Africa, and the continent of Africa, is that, well, that's a lot of people. And if they all start consuming as much as we in North America do, well, the whole world's just going to collapse. The world can't provide all that resources. And that's a very legitimate concern, very legitimate. However, I'm going to show you through this video how we can achieve infinite consumption. And you'll hopefully understand and appreciate where I'm coming from. So here's the idea. If you look back like 200 years ago, 250 years ago, pretty much most of the people on the planet focused on just producing stuff to live on. It was just needs orientated production. We would have people that would produce food. Mostly it was food as the the thing that people would produce, and even that we didn't produce enough of. So 90% of the people would work to produce all the food, and they just wouldn't even produce enough. But then you have like the Industrial Revolution and the rise of capitalism. And the rise of capitalism really kind of fueled the whole Industrial Revolution, where not only did we learn to produce better and faster and more of, we actually went beyond that. So we actually learned how to use less resources to produce more. And that seems kind of like paradoxical, but it's true. We actually got very efficient at producing abundance. So if you look at the modern age, maybe only about 3 to 5% of the whole world is involved with production of food. Uh, it's it's a very small fraction. Yet we produce enough food to feed everyone on the planet. And if you look at the United States, it actually produces alone enough people to feed the whole planet. But most of that food gets used eternally, and a lot of it gets wasted. It's not that they're abusing it and they're just, they're producing all the food and letting the world starve. It's just one of the natural things with food. Food is a perishable item, and often it gets wasted. It's just the reality of it, or people overconsume. So one of the things that happens in the United States is people get fat because they eat a lot. There's just so much abundance. And this doesn't mean that we have problems of not enough people to create that food. We have automation. And that's one thing I really want to mention in this video, is the importance of automation and how that is going to drive this future economy that I'm talking about. And this is a futuristic video that I'm going to be giving you guys today. I want to give you a bit of a crystal ball into the future of what I see is where the world is going. So already I hope I made the case for the fact that things are moving from a needs resource kind of production, where we put a lot of people, a lot of labor into needs production. That's the way it used to be. And now we've kind of shifted from that to more of a want society, where where we don't need that many people to actually produce the needs like food and shelter and blah, blah, blah. We don't need that much people to do all that. We need more. What's happened is those people that used to do those jobs have been automated out. Like if you think about like those big tractors and the, uh, all the resources that have been put into the production of food, well, it doesn't take that many people to plow a field anymore. It doesn't take that many people to produce the food. And what we've done is we actually developed technology that allows us to produce a lot more food in a lot smaller, like without really using that much land, because we have better fertilizers and we have knowledge of how plants grow better. There's also a move for what's called green urban areas, which will actually produce fresh food in cities. So it's going to be one of those things where we're going to be actually able to produce more without taking as much land and providing better quality of life for people, just through the rise of technology and through better allocation of resources, where a lot of people just won't be needed in that production process. So they'll be doing other things. So you'll think, oh, well, one of the concepts is like automation is really demonized nowadays. People are really afraid of it because of the fact that, well, it's taking our jobs away, right? If a machine can do the job of 100 people, then what are those people going to do? And the same fear happened several hundred years ago when the first industrial revolution happened. And people were very afraid. Like, most people went from being farmers and working the fields and working day and night to produce food to all of a sudden not that they weren't needed anymore. So they had to go to the cities and they started, doing other jobs. And even at that time, there was a big shift from production of needs to production of wants. Like then all of a sudden people were working in factories to produce little trinkets and stuff. And now the problem was, and this is the environmentalist concern, is what's happened is most of the production that we see nowadays, most of the labor that we see nowadays is in those industries that are producing needs, not what needs, wants, like trinkets and stuff like that, but we don't really need, but we like. And, and very little is within the needs section. But what's happening is it just produces more and more consumption, more and more consumption. And we get, people that have a whole bunch of junk that they don't really need. And then they throw that junk out and they buy more junk and they fill up the landfills and they're using a lot of resources. And that is a problem. That is a huge problem. And there's only a certain amount of junk we can produce because the world is limited in terms of how much stuff there is. And that's a real concern. But we have entered a new era. And the new era is digital. And because digital doesn't require much resources, we actually are in a state where we can actually consume infinite. So what I mean by that is if you think about your phone and you have like little games on it, right? And this is just a very simple example. There's actually bigger examples I can give. But you download a game on your video, on your phone, and that game is a consumption. It is you're consuming a product that somebody had to prepare and build, okay? And it took a team of people to build that. It took people to imagine it, to create the stories for it, to create the coding for it, and there was a lot of effort that's went into producing that game that you downloaded on your phone. And then some games, like if they have little gems or little things that you buy within the game, and that makes you purchase stuff, and you can buy like resources like within the game, and you just keep on buying things within one little game. Well, then you download other games and you do the same, and all of it all of it is digital. All of it is not real. It's not like more trees have to be cut down or more resources are required to produce those commodities that you're consuming. It's all virtual consumption. It's digital. So the point is, all of a sudden, people can still consume a lot, even more than they'd ever consumed before, um, through a digital means. Now, let's take this step further where the future is kind of going. And it's going into this kind of virtual space with VR and AR, which is augmented reality, um, where you can consume things that aren't real and feel like you've consumed things. Like we could live in a small space, for example, a very small space, and have the feeling that we own a palace because we can go into a virtual reality and we could walk through big halls. We could have like whatever wonderful things that we can imagine, all the resources, all the things that we can imagine that wouldn't be possible to achieve for an individual in real world. But in a virtual world, we can have like, we can be kings. We can rule whole nations inside of virtual reality. And this is something that can be given to anybody. As long as they download the software, they can play the game, they can they can get whatever consumption they want, they can buy things within the games, and they can feel like a king and have that whole uh, consumption, that we need in order to keep the economy going, and feel like they have everything. Like if you compare the average person's life now to somebody who lived like 100 or 200 years ago, even the richest of people that lived that long ago, we're living way better. Like even the not so well off people in our society live better than the kings and queens of old. And it's because we have better resources, like we have better medicine, we have better stuff. We have telephones, we have computers, we have television, we have phones, we have all these technologies that didn't exist that give a much higher quality of life. And maybe I might make the argument that all this consumption is not necessarily a good thing. But if you think about what we have, if you base the quality of life on how much people have, well, we have a lot more now than we ever had before. And as I said, with the whole idea of a virtual reality or a digital consumption, we can have pretty much infinite because it's not actually taking physical resources. It's taking digital resources. And that really allows for a huge amount of growth. But somebody has to build all and that's where the jobs of the future might be, is in within creating those virtual things to consume. I remember playing the game World of Warcraft, and we would always joke because we would see these people, and all their job was they would kill the same monsters over and over again. That's all they would do, to kill the same monsters over and over again. And whenever you kill a monster, you get like some gold and maybe some items. And they would just kill those same monsters over and over again, and they would get certain items that were valuable within the game, and they would get certain amount of gold that was valuable within the game. And people could in real world buy the stuff that those people had collected, and we called those people Chinese farmers. And it was it was just the term within the game we called them, because it was usually people in China whose job was basically to farm these games for resources, and they would sell those resources to gamers in the game, like where you would pay $100 and you get like 10 million gold or something like that, and be like, oh wow, I can buy whatever I want in the game. And but it created jobs for these people where they would just grind out stuff and work inside the game. And and I see more and more of that there's the possibility to do various tasks. Like it's not going to be all these high-end jobs within the virtual space. It can be like these kind of menial tasks, and it can be like tasks that are creative. It can be tasks that are have different functions. And that's probably what's going to happen as well. You're going to have a whole new role for people, where people will have new jobs that weren't even imagined before. Before that game existed, people couldn't imagine somebody doing that as a living, right? And there's going to be a lot more of that. I think of games like SimCity, or games like Second Life, where people can, get into a game and feel like they have like a whole new life within the game. Whether this is a good thing or not, I'm not trying to debate that. I'm just saying this is where the world is going. And this is the crystal ball that I'm trying to show you of the future, where really we can have it all in a weird way, but maybe it's not real, maybe it's not tangible. But the point is, it won't take much resources. It won't be as physically demanding on our world. And that is a good thing. Now, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole of where technology could go, there's like I'm in the digital space. I kind of know this area. One of the things that Google is working on, and this is kind of scary to me, is the concept of the digital download of the human mind. So it could be the case that in the future, we could actually digitally download our brains into the computers. And it's something that they're really working on. And that technology could basically mean that we wouldn't even need a physical form anymore. And this is really the future. This is like far future, hopefully, where we won't even need a physical form, and we will just be some virtual thing ourselves. And just imagine at that point, we could all live in a little box, and that would be the whole world inside a box. And they would, have like whatever resources or whatever they want within a box. And the whole world would be just like, normal, like just grass and greens. It would just be a world of like very little impact. So that's kind of where things are going. That's far future, hopefully, because I kind of still like having a physical form. But, I do see the technology going that way, where we really can do so much more in this digital space than we could ever do in the real space. In the digital space, we can be gods in many ways. And what I mean by that is that we're limited in the real world. We can't fly, we can't buy everything in the world. We're not that rich, and we can't do certain things because we're limited by our physical form. We're limited by our physical wealth and resources and so forth. But in a digital space, anything goes. You're basically able to imagine whatever and produce whatever. And once you get to that level, then really you are a virtual god. And that's possibly where we're going with all this technology. And, this is me sort of like, thinking about where the future of technology is going, but it's not that unrealistic. And if you sort of think about what could be done within a virtual space, well, really the sky's the limit. And it's really limited to how much you can imagine or how much other people can imagine, because we can all work together to create this virtual space. And that's a huge potential opportunity for people to work and play and have this kind of lifestyle. I think we are creatures that require work. We like to work, and we actually feel sad when we don't work. So I think within this virtual reality kind of world and digital space, we will want to work, but it might not be the work that we recognize today. It might not be what we perceive as work. So this is sort of my kind of vision of the future. I want to kind of quickly touch a little bit more on the whole concept of automation and the fear of automation. A lot of people think of automation as being something which is a negative, and it really isn't. It really just, if you look at the history of automation, yes, jobs get lost. Jobs will be lost. But what ends up happening is it frees up people to do bigger and better things. I think about one of the things that I always think about that gives a really good illustration of how powerful automation is within my space, the digital space. Um, there was a technology, it was 3D animation was huge. Back, if you go back into the early 80s and mid 90s, there was a lot of people that were involved in that industry where it would require a lot of work produce one of these 3D images and 3D animation, and it was an incredible amount of work. But then what happened was certain software came out, like DAZ 3D, for example, and that allowed people to, instead of having to code all of that 3D models and so forth, they could do it through a program that would do all that work for them. And at first, that meant a whole bunch of people that were involved with producing these 3D coding things were out of a job. However, what ended up really happening was as it became easier, more people actually became interested in that space. It actually opened up huge opportunities where now you get like people whose whole job is to produce 3D art and be creative and do things that they couldn't have done before because the technology was too much of a barrier to entry. It was just too hard. You couldn't be an artist. You had to be a coder in order to create art, and it didn't work because there are two different types of people. And generally, what ended up happening was the people that produced that art were like just couldn't produce to the level that we love today. Um, and if you think about it this way, where if you can make the barrier entry really, really low through automation, what ends up happening is people can now, instead of working that really grindy kind of work where they're coding and doing the same kind of routine tasks over and over again that can be automated, well, they were freed up to do more creative tasks and to really build things that they could never imagine building before and really not have the boundaries or limitations that they had before. So what happened is there was a huge explosion in terms of digital art and in digital automation. And it just became like a huge boom for that industry. But the people that did the coding also had a boom because they were now working on how to make better and better automation. And they were able to get into producing better and better software that made the job easier and easier, and which makes it so that more people can get involved because it's easier to actually get involved. So automation, instead of limiting jobs, it actually created more jobs, a lot more jobs. So one of the things that people don't understand is that automation frees up resources and makes it easier for people to do jobs that they maybe not wouldn't been able to do before. So really, we shouldn't see automation as a bad thing. It sure, if you really want to work some crazy job that is very routine, yes, you will lose that job, but you'll be able to do a much maybe more fulfilling job that might be actually even more fun to do and less demanding. So what we have to see is automation as being a very positive thing. And it plays into this whole idea that I have of the whole infinite consumption, where, as you can make things more and more easy and the barriers to entry are much more low, more people can basically harness the power of their creativity to create more and more amazing things. And it's going to be the case that that's what we need. We are in a situation where more people are going to produce wants than needs. And it's all about how to entertain people, how to make people more engaged with these virtual realities, how to make people have more fun and have more fulfilling lives. That's what's going to be like where technology is going to take us is, people are going to be focused on how to improve lives, even if it's not necessarily in the real world. It's in this virtual space. So I have a very optimistic uh, vision of the future. And I hope that I've shared some of this optimism with you in terms of where things are going. And hopefully I alleviated some of the fears that people have that, yes, we're consuming too much and our resources are limited. Well, as I said, that becomes less true when you move to this digital world. And it's going to become less and less so in the future. So I hope this makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just a bit of a rant, but also me sort of really doing what I wanted to do with a lot of the stuff that I do is just share ideas and get people thinking, because I really feel like that's really lacking in our world nowadays. So, even when I do all these social justice kind of related videos or videos on capitalism, I do it in a way to provoke thought. And I don't necessarily think that thought is bad or good or bad, but I love the idea of challenging myself and challenging others to think differently and to just be open up to ideas. So this has been my kind of rant or thoughts of the future, my crystal ball. And I hope you enjoyed entering my crystal ball and seeing my vision of the future. And I'd love to hear in the comments below your vision of the future. Where do you think things are going? Where do you think all this technology is taking us? Thanks for watching.